Welcome to our deep dive on effective problem solving.
Oh, very cool.
We're taking inspiration from a classic George Polya's How to Solve It,
Okay.
um, a book from 1945 that's surprisingly relevant even today.
1945.
You might be thinking, 1945, is
Yeah.
that going to help me with my problems?
Right.
Well, Polya, a mathematician at Stanford,
Oh, wow.
wasn't just writing for math whizzes.
Okay.
He was fascinated by the universal challenge of untangling any problem.
Interesting.
And his book resonated with a wide audience, not just academics.
I see.
The multiple prefaces in different editions
Oh, wow.
really highlight how many people saw themselves as problem solvers in need of a better approach.
Yeah, I can see that.
What's fascinating is this book gives you a framework.
Okay.
It forces you to slow down and analyze before you jump into solutions.
So it's more of the process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how does this framework work? Polya breaks down problem solving into 4 phases.
Okay.
Understanding the problem,
Mm-hmm.
devising a plan, carrying out the plan,
Got it.
and looking back.
Makes sense.
It sounds simple.
Yeah.
Almost too simple.
Right.
But each phase has these insightful questions
Oh,
that force you to really grasp what's going on.
so they're kind of prompts to get you thinking in the right direction.
Yeah, let me give you an example from the book.
Sure.
Polya talks about finding the length of a box's diagonal,
A box is diagonal.
what he calls a rectangular parallel pipe.
Oh, so fancy way of saying a box.
Which is just a fancy way of saying a box.
Okay.
He walks through how a teacher might guide a student to the solution,
Mm-hmm.
and he emphasizes that even experienced problem solvers benefit from this breakdown.
I see.
It's like having a roadmap even when you think you know the way.
Right. It helps you stay on track.
Have you ever felt stuck on a project at work?
Oh, yeah. All the time.
Or even just trying to figure something out in your everyday life?
Definitely.
These phases can help you break down the problem and find your way forward.
I like that it's applicable to so many situations.
Yeah. Okay. On to another cool technique Polya talks about.
Okay.
Using analogies.
Analogies. I like
This is
that.
where it gets really interesting.
Interesting.
He believes recognizing similarities between problems, even in totally different fields,
Okay.
can unlock solutions.
So it's like finding a comparable problem you already know how to solve.
It's like finding a comparable problem you already know how to solve
Right.
and applying that knowledge to the new challenge.
Gotcha.
One example he uses is figuring out the center of gravity.
Okay.
Imagine you're trying to find the center of gravity of a complex shape,
Yeah.
like a tetrahedron,
Tetrahedron.
a pyramid with a triangular base.
Oh.
Polya suggests starting with something simpler,
Makes sense.
a triangle.
Yeah. Okay.
He even provides diagrams,
Oh, wow.
figures 7 and 8 in the book,
Okay.
to show how the concepts connect visually.
So you can see the relationship.
By understanding the simpler case,
Yeah.
you gain insights into the more complex one.
That's really cool.
Hold on, isn't relying on analogies risky?
What if the problems aren't as similar as they seem?
That's a good point.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
Analogies are a starting point, not a guarantee.
right.
But Polya is arguing that we often try to reinvent the wheel
I see.
when solutions might be hiding in plain sight.
So we're overthinking it sometimes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Recognizing those patterns
Mm-hmm.
can save us effort and even spark new creative thinking.
I like that a lot.
What else is in this problem-solving toolbox?
I'm curious.
Well, there's this idea of introducing what he calls auxiliary elements and auxiliary problems.
Auxiliary element.
I'm getting a bit lost here.
Yeah.
Auxiliary elements.
What are those?
It's simpler than it sounds.
Okay.
An auxiliary element is something new you add to the problem visually,
Okay.
like drawing an extra line on a diagram.
Got it.
An auxiliary problem is a related problem you solve on the side,
So a side quest almost.
like a side quest.
Yeah.
That might shed light on the main one.
Interesting.
Can you give me an example of how this works?
Sure. Polya uses the example of constructing a triangle.
Okay.
When you only know its altitude, one angle, and the perimeter,
Mm-hmm.
by adding a specific line segment,
Okay.
as shown in figure 11 of the book,
Okay.
you can suddenly find the solution.
Oh, wow.
It's like that aha moment
I see.
when you realize you were missing a key piece of information.
It's like a breakthrough.
So it's like stepping back and saying, what am I missing?
Right.
What new information or perspective can I bring in to get unstuck?
Exactly.
Sometimes we get tunnel vision.
Yeah, we get too focused.
Auxiliary elements and problems
Hmm.
help us widen our view.
I like that it's about expanding your perspective.
This is making me rethink how I approach challenges,
Oh, yeah.
both in my work and in my personal life.
It's about having transferable skills, right?
You got it.
It's not just about geometry. It's about how we think.
Now, how about we explore another strategy?
Okay.
Working backward.
Working backward.
Working backward.
Interesting.
Is that as straightforward as it sounds?
I mean, it sounds pretty self-explanatory.
You bet.
Okay.
Sometimes starting from the desired outcome and retracing the steps
Yeah.
is easier than pushing forward from the beginning.
So you start at the end.
I can see that being useful for some problems.
Right.
But not all.
Not all, no.
True. It's often used in project planning,
Yeah.
where you define the end goal first.
Exactly.
But Polya illustrates this concept
Yeah.
using a seemingly simple puzzle,
Okay.
measuring water with 2 containers of different sizes.
Okay.
He provides a visual breakdown of the steps,
Wow.
showing that even silly puzzles require real thinking.
Interesting.
So working backwards helps you understand the steps needed to reach a goal.
Yeah.
Kind of like reverse engineering a solution.
Exactly.
It forces you to consider the end state
Yeah.
and then figure out what needs to happen beforehand.
Makes sense.
You might be surprised how many problems can be tackled this way.
I bet
This is all fascinating.
it is.
But before we move on, I have to ask, does Polya only focus on cold, hard logic?
That's a good question.
Actually, he repeatedly emphasizes the importance of the student and teacher dynamic,
The student and teacher dynamic.
even when talking about abstract concepts.
So interesting.
He recognizes that problem solving is a human activity.
So it's not just about like algorithms and formulas.
So it's not just about techniques.
Yeah.
It's about understanding our own thinking process, right?
You're picking up what he's putting down.
We're all students when facing new challenges.
Right.
Polya wants us to be aware of common pitfalls,
Okay.
like getting bogged down in details, not checking our work carefully, or failing to see connections.
Those are all very relatable.
He's basically saying don't just learn the steps.
Right.
Learn how your brain works when you're problem solving, right?
Exactly.
We're all susceptible to those mental traps.
Absolutely.
Recognizing them is the first step to becoming more adaptable problem solvers.
I agree.
Before we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Okay.
is there anything else we should highlight from Polya's work?
Let me think.
I think it's important to remember that How to Solve It isn't just a math book.
Okay.
It's about cultivating a problem-solving mindset
Right.
that applies to any field.
That's a great point.
It's about transferable skills, not
Yeah.
just equations.
Exactly.
So far, we've uncovered a powerful framework for approaching problems, the surprising power of analogies,
Absolutely.
and even the counterintuitive strategy of working backward.
I'm ready for more.
I'm ready for more.
What other problem-solving wisdom does Polya have in store for us?
Well, stay tuned.
Okay.
We'll be back with more insights from How to Solve It in the next part of our deep dive.
Sounds good.
All right.
I'm excited.
Welcome back.
Yes.
We're continuing our deep dive into George Pólya's How to Solve It.
Okay.
And I'm really excited to explore more of his strategies.
Me too.
Last time we talked about his framework for approaching problems, the surprising power of analogies,
Yeah.
and even the counterintuitive idea of working backward. So where do we go from here? What other problem-solving gems does Polya have for us?
Well, one of the recurring themes in the book
Okay.
is the importance of what he calls bright ideas.
Bright ideas.
Yeah.
It sounds like he's talking about waiting for a stroke of genius.
Yeah.
Is that really a strategy?
Well, there's definitely an element of inspiration involved.
Okay.
But Polya doesn't believe those bright ideas just appear out of nowhere. He argues they're often the result of careful preparation
Okay.
and a deep understanding of the problem.
So it's not about passively waiting for a miracle.
No.
It's about putting in the work so you're ready when inspiration strikes.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm following you.
Yeah.
But how do we create the conditions for these bright ideas to emerge?
Well, Polya emphasizes the importance of really examining the problem,
Oh.
breaking it down into its parts, and looking for connections and patterns.
So really getting to know the problem inside and out.
Exactly.
Okay.
He also encourages experimentation.
Experimentation.
Yeah, trying different approaches and, yes, even making mistakes along the way.
Wait, mistakes.
Yeah,
I thought the whole point of problem solving was to avoid those.
that's a common misconception.
It is.
But Polya sees mistakes as valuable learning opportunities. He even dedicates a whole section of the book to learning from our mistakes.
Really?
He wants us to analyze our errors and figure out why we went wrong.
I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's only after I figure out where I messed up
Right.
that I see the right way forward.
Exactly.
Mistakes can be frustrating,
Oh, for sure.
but they can also be incredibly instructive
Yeah.
if we approach them with the right mindset.
Absolutely.
It's about shifting our perspective, seeing errors as part of the process, not as failures.
I like that.
What else does Polya suggest?
Well, he reminds us that even experienced problem solvers can make careless errors, and that taking the time to carefully check our work can save us from unnecessary headaches.
That seems obvious, but honestly, I'm guilty of rushing through solutions, only to realize I made a silly mistake that I could have easily caught if I'd slowed down.
We've all been there.
We have.
But Polya takes this idea a step further.
Okay.
He suggests that checking your work isn't just about catching errors. It's about deepening your understanding of the solution.
Oh, interesting.
He wants us to ask ourselves,
okay,
can I check the result? Can I derive the result differently?
So it's not just about getting the right answer.
No.
It's about understanding the problem and the solution
Yes.
from multiple angles.
You got it.
He argues that by deriving a result in different ways,
Okay.
you can verify its correctness and solidify your grasp of the underlying concepts.
That makes a lot of sense.
It's like checking your work elevates the whole problem-solving experience. It's not just about being right. It's about learning and growing.
Absolutely.
And this ties back to his focus on the human element in problem-solving.
Right.
We're not robots just crunching numbers.
No.
We're trying to make sense of the world around us.
Exactly.
Okay. I'm really starting to see how Polya's approach goes beyond just solving equations.
Yeah.
It's about developing a way of thinking that applies to all kinds of challenges.
It is.
But I have to ask,
Okay.
what happens when you're truly stumped? What does he say about those times when you hit a wall and can't seem to make any progress?
Well, he has a technique for that, too.
Oh, he does.
He calls it variation of the problem.
Variation.
Yeah.
What does that mean exactly?
It means changing something about the problem itself
Okay.
to gain a fresh perspective.
So shaking things up a bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
This could involve changing the unknown,
Hmm.
changing the data, or even changing the condition of the problem.
So if you're stuck, you shake things up a bit. You don't give up on the problem entirely, but you try approaching it from a different angle.
Exactly.
It reminds me of what we talked about earlier with auxiliary elements and problems.
Yes.
It's about expanding your perspective,
Well,
getting unstuck.
you're connecting the dots.
And Polya provides a great example to illustrate this.
Oh, cool.
He uses the problem of finding the volume of a frustum of a pyramid. Way of frustum. I'm going to need a refresher on what that is.
Sure. So imagine you slice the top off a pyramid.
Okay.
The remaining piece with its two parallel bases is called a frustum.
Got it.
Yeah.
So how does variation help us find its volume?
Well, Polya starts by asking,
Okay.
what happens if we change the relationship between the sides of the bases?
Okay.
What if the top base is smaller than the bottom base? What if they're equal?
Okay.
What if the top base becomes so small, it's just a point making the frustum into a full pyramid?
Ah, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
By exploring these different variations. We might find a simpler case that's easier to solve.
Exactly.
And then work our way back to the original problem.
Exactly.
And in the process, we might gain new insights that we wouldn't have discovered otherwise. It's like Polya is saying, don't be afraid to play with the problem. Your hand's dirty.
Yeah.
Explore different possibilities and see what happens.
You got it.
He's encouraging us to be playful and experimental in our approach.
I like that.
He also makes another really important point
Okay.
about the value of variation.
Mm-hmm.
He observes that it's often in solving a more general problem
Okay.
that we develop a deeper understanding of the specific problem we're trying to solve.
Wait, that sounds counterintuitive.
It does.
Wouldn't focusing on the specific problem be more efficient?
You might think so.
Yeah.
But Polya argues that by stepping back and looking at the bigger picture,
Okay.
we often uncover connections and patterns that we wouldn't have seen otherwise.
So it's about seeing the forest for the trees. Okay.
This can lead to more elegant and insightful solutions and a richer understanding of the subject matter.
I see.
I'm starting to see a theme here. Polya is constantly encouraging us to think beyond the immediate problem,
Right.
to connect ideas, to look for patterns.
It's about making us better thinkers overall.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
How to solve it isn't just a toolbox of techniques.
Okay.
It's a philosophy of learning.
I love that.
It's about developing a mathematical mindset
Yeah.
that applies to any field, right?
Exactly.
Speaking of learning,
Yeah.
one technique that really stood out to me
Okay.
was specialization.
Specialization.
It's essentially the opposite of generalization.
So if generalization is about broadening our view,
Right.
specialization is about zooming in on a particular detail.
Precisely.
Okay.
And Polya argues that this can be particularly useful
Mm-hmm.
in testing the validity of a general statement or theorem.
Interesting.
Can you give me an example of how this works?
Sure. Let's say we're trying to prove a theorem about all triangles.
Okay.
To test it,
Mm-hmm.
we might choose a specific type of triangle,
Okay.
an isosceles triangle,
Mm-hmm.
and see if the theorem holds true in that case.
I see.
Yeah.
So by testing the theorem in a specific, well-defined instance,
Right.
we can gain a better understanding of its limitations or potential exceptions.
Exactly.
And if it doesn't hold true in that specific case,
Yeah.
then we know the general theorem needs to be refined.
Yeah, exactly.
And Polya points out that this process of specialization
Okay.
can also help us find counterexamples to general statements.
Like proving all birds fly wrong by simply pointing to a penguin.
You got it.
That's a counterexample.
That's a counterexample.
Yeah.
And Polya argues that specialization can be a powerful tool for uncovering these counterexamples.
I see.
He uses the example of two ships traveling at different speeds
Okay.
and asks at what moment are they nearest to each other. The intuitive answer might be that they're closest when they're moving in the same direction.
That seems logical.
It does.
If they're both heading the same way, the distance between them should be shrinking.
But Polya challenges this assumption.
Oh, really?
He uses specialization
Okay.
by considering the extreme case where one ship is at rest. In this scenario, it becomes clear that the ships are actually closest
Okay.
when the moving ship is directly opposite the stationary ship.
Wow, that's a great example
It is.
of how specialization can challenge our assumptions.
Right.
And lead to new insights.
It forces us to question what we think we know.
Yeah.
And by testing those assumptions rigorously, we can arrive at a more accurate understanding of the problem.
This is all so fascinating.
It is.
I feel like we've covered so much ground.
We have.
But there's still more to unpack.
There is.
Before we move on to the final part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
what should we leave our listeners pondering?
I think it's worth reflecting on the fact that how to solve it isn't just about math. Right?
It's about developing habits of mind that are valuable in all areas of life.
Absolutely.
It's about curiosity, persistence, and the willingness to see problems as opportunities for learning and growth.
I love that takeaway.
Problems as opportunities.
Yeah. It's a great reminder.
It is.
That even when we're faced with challenges, there's always something to be gained from the experience.
Exactly. And that, I believe, is at the heart of Polya's message.
It is.
So stay tuned for the final part of our deep dive.
Okay.
Where we'll explore even more of his insights.
Great.
And wrap up our journey through how to solve it.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to our final deep dive into how to solve it.
Yeah, it's been a great journey so far.
We've covered so much ground already.
We have.
From Polya's framework to analogies working backward, and even those aha moments he calls bright ideas.
Those are always fun.
I'm excited to see what else he has in store for us.
Me too.
We've talked about techniques.
But does Polya address the mindset needed for effective problem solving?
Good question.
Absolutely.
Okay.
One of the most insightful parts of the book is his discussion of pedantry and mastery.
Pedantry and mastery.
He contrasts these two approaches to using rules and procedures.
Interesting.
Pedantry.
Pedantry.
That makes me think of someone who's overly rigid and focused on rules for their own sake.
Like a stickler for the rules.
Am I on the right track?
You're spot on.
Okay.
Polya describes the pedant as someone who applies rules mechanically without understanding the why behind them.
Okay.
They might know all the steps,
Yeah.
but they lack the flexibility and adaptability of a true master.
So a master in this context is someone who gets the deeper principles, not just the rote steps.
They can bend the rules when needed.
Exactly. A master has internalized the principles and can use them creatively. They see the bigger picture, the connections between ideas.
It's about seeing the whole system.
It's not about memorizing formulas. It's about developing real understanding.
Exactly.
This makes me think about learning in general.
Yeah.
Maybe the struggle is more important than just getting the right answer.
Oh, interesting.
Maybe that's what makes us better thinkers.
That's a profound insight.
It is.
And aligns perfectly with Polya's view of problem solving as a human endeavor.
It's about embracing the challenge.
Yeah.
The messiness, the uncertainty.
It's not always a clean process.
It's about being a lifelong student, always learning, always growing.
Absolutely.
And Polya reminds us,
Yeah.
this journey never truly ends.
It doesn't.
There's always more to discover, more to understand, more to master.
Always something new to learn.
What about intuition?
Intuition.
Does Polya think there's a role for that in problem solving?
He does acknowledge its power,
Okay.
especially in the early stages, but he cautions against relying on it solely.
So it's about finding a balance
Yes.
between intuition and logic.
Exactly.
Intuition helps generate ideas and make connections,
Right.
but you need logic and reasoning
Yeah.
to test and refine them.
To make sure they actually work.
It's like intuition sparks the fire,
Okay.
and logic makes sure it burns in a controlled way.
I like that analogy.
And this balance shows up again
Okay.
when Polya talks about different types of reasoning, heuristic and rigorous.
Heuristic and rigorous.
Remember those terms from earlier?
Yeah, kind of.
Refresh my memory.
Yeah.
What do they mean again?
Okay, so heuristic reasoning is about exploration and discovery.
Okay.
Educated guesses
Okay.
to guide your thinking.
Right?
Rigorous reasoning is about proving statements with certainty, using formal logic.
So heuristic is more exploratory,
Yes.
while rigorous is about solidifying and proving things.
Precise.
And Polya believes both are essential.
They both have their place.
Heuristic reasoning gets you moving, generates ideas, and rigorous reasoning validates those ideas,
Yeah.
making sure they hold up.
It's a good system of checks and balances.
It's like the scientific method.
Oh, yeah.
You start with a hypothesis, often based on intuition or observation,
Right.
and then you test it rigorously
Yeah.
with experiments and evidence.
That's a great connection.
It shows how Polya's ideas reach beyond just math
You
and
don't.
to all sorts of inquiry.
Absolutely.
So what's the one big takeaway you want listeners to remember
Okay.
from our deep dive into how to solve it?
I think the most important message
Yeah.
is that problem solving is a skill you can learn.
It's not about innate talent.
No, it's not about being born a genius.
It's about cultivating the right mindset, a systematic approach,
Yeah,
and embracing the challenge.
exactly.
I love that.
It means we can all become better problem solvers,
We can.
no matter our background.
Exactly.
And Polya gives us the tools and guidance to start that journey.
This has been a truly rewarding deep dive.
It has.
I've learned some great techniques,
Me too.
but also gained a deeper appreciation for the power of structured thinking.
I agree.
I hope our listeners feel the same way.
I hope so too.
Remember, the next time you face a challenge, don't shy away.
Yeah.
Embrace it as a chance to learn, grow, and become a more masterful problem solver.
That's a fantastic note to end on.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep those minds curious.
Yes, stay curious.
And remember, every problem is an opportunity.
Absolutely.